Welcome to Soundbreaker. On today's episode, we're talking to Jonathan Barrios, who is a data scientist, AI educator, and an author, AI ML instructor at CBT Nuggets, and also he's the author of AI for Musicians, which is my favorite. That's what really got my attention, is AI for Musicians. There's so much to ask, so much to talk about, and we're going to pick your brain. I know it's going to be extremely insightful and helpful, hopefully, for a lot of our audience and a lot of artists out there, because I do feel that AI is not being used at the level it should be. I don't know if I'm using the right term. I think it's being used in a very cheap way, not in a high intellectual way that really could advance and help music, music industry, artists, producers, and all of that. I want to thank you for joining us today, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, if you want to give us a little bit of insight about yourself before we dive into it.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on, Bob.
My
And yeah,
pleasure.
so what I would say is the easiest way to to say this is that by day I am teaching data science, machine learning, and AI engineering at CBT Nuggets, and that is more formal training. In the evening, I'm actually managing three different startups, and they're aiming to solve real world problems, and those are helping musicians navigate gen AI, because I am equally a musician as I am a data scientist and a machine learning engineer. So that's a unique perspective that I have. And so as we go through this, I hope to make the case that I know a lot about music, not just about data science, programming, and machine learning. And because of that, I'm really excited to be here and to talk about that.
Great, great. This is exciting for me, actually. And all right. So, how do we, before we dive into it, just a bit about your background. How did this whole thing came around, and what really kind of incite you and it kind of motivate you to take that path? Obviously, you're a musician, so you were influenced
Mhm.
at a younger age to love music, to play, and to be involved in music, whether it's from a family or friends. But also, you took that to a music tech, not just music. You kind of followed the path in music tech.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So if I start with the music part, my father is he's Venezuelan, and he always wanted me to be a flamenco guitarist. So I started very early playing classical guitar, and I started playing Spanish romantic classical music like Francisco Tárrega or Agustin Barrios. No relationship there, but incredible guitar players. And so I started off like that. And when I moved to Miami, I actually studied guitar in South Korea, and so my first language is Japanese. So then it was Spanish, and then I learned English in Korea.
Your
So
first
that's
language
kind
is
of the
Japanese.
yeah, and so that's part of my story.
Intriguing.
I'm always coming at things from the outside, and I've always been learning and adapting, and that's partly why I do what I do. And so I hope to make that case because it's an interesting story, and I feel that I have this unique perspective that I'm trying to share. So my father wanted me to be a flamenco guitarist. And I learned in Korea, then I moved to Miami. And when I moved to Miami, I was getting acclimated because there's a big cultural shift. And
Yes.
my friends were asking me, "So what kind of music do you listen to?" And I kind of didn't really know. Told them what I played, but they're like, "No, like music that we know. What is Francisco Tarrega? What are these pieces?" And so I started to search through the radio, and then I heard all kinds of stuff, and it was really, it's kind of a discovery process. But then I landed on John Coltrane without knowing anything about jazz, and it kind of just struck me. And this is something that actually happens to quite a few people when they listen to John Coltrane. This is not just unique to me. I found out later this is a thing. I heard something inside of the sound, and that just stuck with me. And I kind of dropped it and told people, yeah, I was into John Coltrane. They're like, who is that? And so eventually they showed me other music, and I kind of got into pop music. But that's how I got into jazz guitar. Later on, when I started to play the guitar, I could play guitar, but I couldn't play electric guitar. When I was given an electric guitar, I was instantly able to play it very easily. So people were like really encouraging me. So my young ego was like, "Wow, I'm good at this. I should really play electric guitar." And very quickly, I went into jazz. I was very fascinated by that, and I remember John Coltrane. So that's what really got me into the jazz part.
Again, being in Miami, it's very much Cuban influence, very Latin influence, Miami, especially Miami, part of Florida. and it's
Yeah.
not jazz influenced. And so you are non-traditional, learning how to play guitar in South Korea, and then getting into jazz in Miami. So both a non-traditional path to the to the style of music that wherever you are.
Yeah, I also played in salsa bands. So I'm half Venezuelan, so I grew up with Latin music too. So I did have an opportunity to play salsa bands, and I had my own sort of Latin jazz band. So there's a combination there. Latin jazz is a strong thing. You take salsa
Huge.
and all the
Hmm.
Cuban influence, and then you mix it with jazz. That's was probably one of the most successful things that I've ever done, because you're taking something complicated that is really the musician's music, and you're putting it in salsa where people can dance, right? So jazz took a detour and started creating bebop, which is non-danceable music. So the combination of salsa with jazz was really like a that was probably the most exciting for me, because at least commercially, right? Because there was commercial success. Aside of that, everything that I've done is not really commercially uh, popular. It's more about the art. So I'm more of an artist than I am an entertainer, just to make that distinction.
Very interesting. And interesting story, I would say. Very interesting and intriguing. Let's dive into it. So you kind of get into how did that all of that get you into tech and get you involved in data science and technology
Yeah.
and two different worlds. I would say from your background and and the music culture influence that you had, you became more of a music scientist also, beside being an artist, because you combine all of these influence that, beside you traveling and living different parts of the world, obviously influence, South Korea, Japan, you speak Japanese, and all of these things obviously has influence on your music knowledge and music taste, you know.
Yeah, that's I like how you said music scientist. That really is a great way to put it. And so the thing that people might not understand about jazz and the large language models, these chatbots, is that there's a lot of similarities, because deep learning, which is the software that created Chat GPT and all these models, all of that is software modeled after the human brain. They use neural
Hmm.
networks. So there's a lot of parallels there. So when a jazz musician is training, we're practicing scales, and that is training. That is our data set, the training data. And we're training our models, which are biological neural networks. And we do that so we can do inference. So a chat GPT is spitting out tokens, but a jazz musician is spitting out notes in the instant, in that moment. And they're very similar, right? So when the chat GPT is using a tokens in a distribution, so probability distribution, but a jazz musician is doing it emotionally. And I'm going to make the case later, because of that. These are two different tools. Humans making music and AI making music are totally different things, even though it seems very similar. So a jazz musician can be like, play something like that, and I'm just doing that off the top of my head, just shooting those tokens out like a chatbot does, but they're totally different. So to go back and circle back and answer your question, so how did I make this transition? I made the case that they're similar, and that's one part. But what happened to me is I really progressed, and this is where I want to like really explain that how much I do know about music. I spent a lot of time with music professionally, touring and playing with a lot of different groups. So after the salsa band, I was really playing straight ahead jazz and salsa music, and then I got into free jazz. Did that for quite some time. And then I did something called free improvisation, and I started to play with some of the top players in that genre, if you want to call it that. I lived at Jack Wright's house in Philadelphia. That's where I did most of my professional music career outside of Miami. And all of that is really experimental sort of music. And then I got into modern classical music. And then I started to write my own musical theory and systems. And I started to use things like Max MSP, which, if those of you who use Ableton might know, that there's a connection between Max MSP from Cycling 74 and Ableton. And so I was trying to
Hmm.
create these musical systems, but I found it very difficult. So I reached out to the Philadelphia sort of tech community, and I didn't find that very helpful. The tech community was, very specific in their ways, and I'm this artist trying to integrate with tech. And so I was like, I really need help with this. And the weirdest thing happened. I don't know if you've ever heard of iTunes University. We all know iTunes. So back in the day, I listened to music through iTunes. I would burn my CDs, but they had something called iTunes University, and this professor at Stanford, Andrew Ng, had a class at CS 229 on deep learning. And this was like 2009, 2010. And
Wow,
that's when I
that
started to
early.
study. That's when I started. Yeah, because I knew I actually read a book by Ray Kurzweil that talked about the progression of AI, where it was going. And I was like, well, I could use that to write the greatest music software that I could only dream of creating.
Yes,
And that's the
100%.
story that I want to share with everybody. It's like, that's what I'm doing today. And that's what my startups are doing. And so I'm excited to talk about that. But that's how I got into it. I really spent a long time as a professional musician and went straight into deep learning. And so when I made my professional career switch, it was quite easy because I already knew quite a bit of tech. I actually, when I was in Korea, uh, I got into programming games. So I already had a programming background, and I was watching my brother using a hex editor to change the code to like give you like different lives. So like 0 3 lives to FF, which would be 255 lives. So I used to wake up early and sneak in and kind of mess around with the computer, break a lot of software, and then eventually I got in trouble. And then I started to program my own sort of software by going to the library and checking out books that had robots. Program your own uh, video games and things like that. So that's kind of like my unusual way of getting into tech. But I've been working with deep learning for quite some time.
Wow, amazing. Really intriguing, very intriguing. And actually that start will answer is answering my question, how AI being used by musicians, by producers, and is it really being used properly? Is it adding flair and soul to it? Because music is all about soul, and it doesn't matter what type of music it is, because it's all about emotions. It's all about, as you said,
Yeah.
just people coming up with things on the top of their head, like coming up with rhythm, beat it out of, you know, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a human practice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you said you have three startups that you involved with, that you are mentoring and advising. I don't know if you're also involved with them, but what are these startups about? What are they about, and how? What's and what? How they going to be influencing the business and where we're going? Because the business right now is a crossroad when it comes to AI.
Yeah. It
Certain
definitely is.
distributors and certain DSPs, digital streaming platforms, saying no, we don't want it, and they're accepting it, and which is, but where is it going? I mean, artists are using it. I advise artists to use AI and producers, and they are
Yeah.
using it. But are
Yeah.
they using it the right way? Are they using it to create something new, or just to kind of create something, or to create, because humans are the only ones who are able to create new trends, new sounds, uh,
There you go.
new styles, like how as we know how music progressed from generations, the 60s, the 50s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, early 2000, how different styles of music came in, whether it's hip hop or soul R&B or disco or dance or house or hip hop, and there's so many different genres, freestyle, and all of these things came through generations. Like, oh, listening to the 80s or 70s, or rock and everything. So AI not going to give you that. Humans going to do that. And is you think if AI being used properly, would it start helping producers and artists to come up with new styles of sounds and music and new genres?
Yeah, you're touching on really the core of the problems that I'm trying to solve. So I have three startups, and they all work together to solve three real world problems. So this is not to make money. This is really just to give back to the music community because I have this perspective and I can see into the future quite a bit because I understand deeply how these models are built and how Gen AI works. And I'm also a musician, and so I see immediately, okay, these are the things that I need to talk about. So Barrios AI is actually was founded in 2023. So I've been doing this for 3 years already. I knew this was coming, but now we're really in 2026, right in the middle of it. So all of these things, there's lawsuits everywhere, and people are very concerned about intellectual property rights and training data. And this is now the conversation started. So Barrios AI is really the educational part. So, the getting musicians to understand what AI is and how it can be used. And I have two target audiences there: people who want to be more like me, which is to be pretty proficient in machine learning and understand AI engineering and also use music together, right? So more like the music scientist. And then I have beginner books, and those books are just focusing on beginners that are musicians and how they can use it without becoming engineers, right? So those are the two that I'm trying to target there, and it's very important to really have that conversation for those two demographics. Then I have something called Guitari, which I'm a co-founder, and that is to help. Really, it's trying to solve online guitar learning, but instead of learning covers, I have proven curriculum for guitar, and I'm really just donating all of that to Guitari, and we're going to help people learn guitar. But the goal is to focus on your voice, not just playing covers. And I'm going to circle back to that and why that is so important to really create something that encourages people to really dig deep and say, what is my voice in the music, right? What do I want to create? What is unique and authentic, right? So this is kind of getting back to what you were saying, Bob, right? Like humans and culture produce these different genres. It doesn't just come out of training data and there's all of a sudden it's going to predict a new genre. I mean, it can, but it's going to do so in a way that it's non-human. So we'll
Hmm.
circle back to that because that's super important. And then the third startup is called Cosmo Harmonics. And so when I first started to learn deep learning, this is where I was daydreaming of what I could create, these new musical systems. And that's where I'm actually creating those musical systems and using it's a decentralized recording label as well. It uses blockchain technology, and we use data poisoning and different techniques like watermarking to protect all of this data from models training on it and things like that. It's
Hmm.
also very unique music, so it'd be hard for them to train on that data. There wouldn't be enough data for them to do that. So those are the three different startups that are all helping to protect music in some way and musicians. And this is the number one thing that I wanted to say is that if a lot of people start to use generative AI, well, there's some risks that happen, like model collapse. And so, what does that mean? Well, it means that the music will all start to sound more and more similar, right? So,
Hmm.
it's the opposite of what you were saying, Bob. So, how do we create new genres? Well, it's pretty hard to do if you're relying on just prompting music, right? Because the least interesting thing about prompting and creating music is the prompter. All you're doing is typing words. The music is being manufactured and generated by these large language models, right? So
Hmm.
they're doing the heavy lifting and you're just typing. Now, sure, there's going to be people that are going to be really creative and can create some new things. And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing that. But I will say there are really weird artifacts that can come out of this. Like mimetic evolution is one theory where there's two main dangers here. One, the music starts to sound the same, and then everyone, instead of creating new genres, creates a lot of the same music. And then something like Spotify will come around and then take the prompter out of the picture. And now the models are just creating the music themselves and just going forward. The other
Hmm.
one is cognitive and creative decline. So when you rely on these models too much and you're not practicing and you're not creating music and you're not exercising your creative muscle and thinking artistically, when you don't do that, you use it or you lose it. So you'll lose it to the model. The model will get better at doing that, and you'll get weaker at doing that. So that is
Correct.
something that I teach engineers as well. Like if you over rely on this stuff, or if you're a creative writer, you're going to get worse at writing. The whole idea for humans is to train their models, their biological neural networks, and not outsource that to a model. And
Hmm.
that's what I'm teaching at Barrios AI. How do you use these things safely? Because you wouldn't really think that, like, oh, if I use it too much, I'm going to slowly get dumber. Who's going to think that? Well, I'm going to slowly get less creative, right? But there's studies on all of this stuff. It's pretty documented, and more studies are coming in as we speak, because it is a real thing and it's also affecting students and education. So it's a bigger problem. And just to end really quickly, I believe the evolution of these models are going to reach a level of proficiency where they're going to do amazing things, but it's going to be different than human music making, right? So I really think humans are really designed to be creative. And these AI models are, when they get good enough, we'll see what they really are. Right now, we're really confused because, oh, yeah, it can write, it can create music, it can create art, but it looks the same. But if you dig deep into the models, it's not the same. It's a human act. And while I'm not trying to discourage anybody from using these models, there are dangers that I want to advise and to make sure that everybody knows. And that is, there is risks that are counterintuitive, and there are, and I can just get started on this. You got to watch out with what you enter into the chat box when you're typing. You have to watch out how you use them because they can take your music and train on it. There's all kinds of dangers. And so instead of expanding on all of this, which would be a podcast onto itself, I've just created books at Barrios AI. So you go there, and the books, you can download them or buy them for $20, but you can also just watch them on YouTube. I'm going to start putting them on YouTube for free. So you can see the code, and I start typing. We can type along, and then you'll understand what's happening. And then if you want to support Barrios AI and get the code itself and actually own the book, then you could buy it. So it's really going to be available for free. But it's also, if you want to dig deeper and you want access to like Slack or like Discord, and you want to ask me questions, then you have to buy the book. So that's the way that I'm trying to like get that information out there. It's not, again, to make money. It's really just to contribute to the music community.
Hmm. So you saw the problem coming, and um, how should I say, and growing, and nobody's paying attention to it, and this is why there's a big fight, because it's just music. It's just being made. It might sound good, but it's nothing new, nothing creative, nothing with a twist, nothing taking something old and making it with a twist something new. None of that creative part
Right.
is involved, because all it's doing, yeah, it's getting better at replicating and making music in that genre, but it's nothing new. It's not creating anything kind of out of the ordinary. It's like, oh,
Exactly.
whoa, wow, sounds good. What is that music? What kind is that? What is, you know, and is it gonna slow down the progress of us coming up in every decade, or every half a decade, or every decade or half a decade? Let's just say there's a new style of music coming out. You know, whether it's new style of hip hop, R&B, or rock, or dance, or this or that.
Yeah, and that's what, yeah, that's one of the things that I talk about. And whenever you do hear AI generated song that actually sounds interesting, that's because a human thought of a really cool combination,
Yes,
right? And that's what
correct.
you're saying. It's not the model coming up with that combination. It can execute that combination. But the more that the models get involved, it starts to sound the same because it can't do that. It's working on existing training data, and it can generate new things. But if you're a writer, a creative writer, or if you're a designer, or if you're an artist, you can easily see what's wrong with all of this stuff. But if you're a beginner at any of these
Yeah.
creative tasks or fields, right? You're like, oh, wow, I'm creating art now, or I'm creating music, or look at me, I can write so well, because before I really struggled with writing, So we could
Or
all
depended on
identify with
somebody
one or,
else. It costs me money
maybe,
and time. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And it's like, now I don't have to do that. I could just use this model. But then the hidden danger is that the more that you do it and you just outsource, the quote is this. This is what I use all the time. And it comes from this really smart person on X. That's where all the machine learning engineers are talking. You can outsource your thinking, but you cannot outsource your understanding. And when we're talking about creativity, you can also not outsource your creativity. So those are the things that need to remain human. Because if you don't understand what you're writing, if it's generating code, it's very, very dangerous. If you don't understand the music that you're making, then also there's some hidden dangers there. And it's okay to use the AI, but there's this relationship that is really something that you don't hear very often. So when you see Cosmo Harmonics, my record label with my music,
Yeah.
I don't use it to make any music at all. It does all this other stuff, right? And I saw a post not too long ago, I think it was on LinkedIn. It was like, I want AI to do my laundry and do my chores so I can get back to doing art. And that's what I think sums up this relationship. So Sure, if you want to use AI to do creative tasks, do it, but understand the risks so that you can protect yourself and also intellectual property rights. But really, I think the tool here, the advantage is that it can actually help you do all the things that are not creative so that you can get back to doing things that are creative. Imagine all the self-publishing, creating websites for promotions, or creating records. So that I saw somebody that you had on a podcast for, they had the product Rox. They're
All
helping to
rocks, yeah.
use, yeah, that's a great product, right? It helps musicians create those products. And that's a great use case for AI. It's not making music for you, but it's making the process of getting the music out easier so that you can get back to being a creative human being. And I think that's really the most powerful thing about AI that people are not really seeing right now. But if you talk to an artist or a musician, they'll definitely appreciate that because there's a joy in playing music. There's a joy in creating art. There's a joy in
Absolutely.
practicing and doing something difficult, right? And yeah, people don't want to give that away, but you know what? We don't want to do laundry, right? We don't want to have to do a lot of technical things that you have to do in order to like get your work out there. And I think that's where it can really help you as being an assistant. Then you can get creative with how you create that relationship with AI. But I think ultimately, and time will tell, right? We'll look back at this podcast in 5 years to see whether or not I was right. But I have a pretty good feeling that that's the direction that we're going in.
Do you think the future of music tech and AI will be where music will be made with artists or producers will be very much involved in the outcome that AI will generate for them? They, if you know what I mean, like it'll be a collaborative effort to create that new trend and that new sound that
Right.
fits you and that you like. Would you think this is where it would be, instead of prompting an album in a second, it'll be like working on a song first, the sound that you want, and adding your own taste, like, certain basic things maybe AI will give you, but you're going to take it and say, okay, I need to add this, I need to change this, where it allows you to do all of that on the platform itself. It'll become more of a
That's a,
editing, producing studio for you as an artist, and really very much involved in generating that outcome that you kind of have it in your mind, but still hasn't been put together, and the sound hasn't didn't come together yet.
yeah, that's a great question. And I think the more created, the more human creativity that you add to anything, and especially a multiplier like AI, the more interesting it's going to be. So I would say for sure that I would say it would go in that direction because there's really no stopping AI and generative AI right now. It's going to be used in one way or another, and not necessarily the way that I'm advocating, which is don't use it to make any music at all. Use it to, do the tasks that are not music so that you can make more music. So that's what ideally I am seeing. But you're talking about this collaboration, and I think that we're going to see higher quality music when it's approached in that way as opposed to prompting, right? Because
Correct.
prompting is going to start to all sound together and everyone's going to be able to do it. So why would we need anybody else to create music? Well, the people who know how to use AI and they're creative with it are going to sound better than people who are just prompting. And that's something we're not seeing just yet. But, and also if they own all of their, let's say you take a popular artist that owns all of their own music, which is rare, but let's say they do, they can take that music and use that as training data in their own models. At that point, they would be generating stuff that's theirs. They own it, and they can push back and go to new places and new heights with their own proprietary data. And I see that being something that could be very interesting. Not necessarily for art music and music science, like what you were describing earlier. That's more of a human process completely. But there are going to be cases where you do have like music that that is super popular, and I think that having control of your own training data and generating it using creativity and and exercising human judgment where you retain the creative control the whole time, that's going to sound better than prompting and just letting the machine do it. You can almost see that right now if you're just like do this kind of music, and that's really going to something called prompt engineering. That's my second book at Barrios AI. because people are talking to these models like it's a person, right? But it's not. You're literally programming in English. So when you talk to these things, you're really creating software or some kind of an output, and it's really just programming. So there's another quote that I like to say all the time, which is the hottest new programming language is English, and that comes from Andrew Karpathy, who started OpenAI. He was one of the lead AI researchers there, and then went on to computer vision at Tesla. And that was his quote. I use that all the time because the more you understand how to talk to these models, the better output you're going to get. And that's what you were saying, Bob. To use it to its full potential, you're going to have your proprietary data and an understanding of how to prompt these models. So your own version of prompt engineering is a great question.
Hmm. I have a feeling that even though when it comes to technology in the entertainment industry, music always ahead of visual, which is film, video. And I have a feeling that video and movies, they gonna take it the proper route now. I feel, making AI as a new genre was added to. I think the Oscars just added it recently to make it as a new genre, and by also having Netflix, investing a large sum of money into it. They see the
Right.
potential, and the potential is not replacing humans or actors. No, it's actually using both. And I think that's where the creativity of AI and human gonna really shine. We're both involved in creativity. Obviously, there's certain things that you're gonna save on the cost and shooting certain scenes and creating certain things, whether you're making sci-fi movies or superhero or certain movies that where AI comes into play and you perfect it and you wouldn't even know the difference. But still, there's actual cameras and
Right.
shots and shoots and scripts and real actors and
Yeah.
real scenes both involved. And that's where I think it's gonna go. And I feel like the entertainment industry and the movie side, they're gonna take it to a higher level and surpass even the music industry on it.
That's a great point. And that kind of ties into what we are just talking about. If you
Mhm.
can abstract all the difficult parts of making a movie, the budget goes down and you can get back to making good movies again because you're not just constrained by budgetary constraints, right? That's those things are real forces that you have to contend with when you're making movies. And I have lots of ideas of what I want to do with AI in movies. Like, maybe I didn't like that ending. Let me add my own ending, but that's my own selfish view there. But I think what you were saying was pretty cool because if you can create backgrounds and do special effects and use Gen AI to do that, and you can do it really, really well because your prompt engineering skills are just on fire. And then you
Mhm.
have cameras that you're using for actors where the actors can
Correct.
act. You get the best of both worlds, right? CGI
Yes.
is not real. We know that. And so this Gen
Oh
AI is
yeah.
not real. We know that. That's a perfect combo right there. But use a really
Mhm.
nice camera and get some really good acting and some really good human script writing involved. And then you have like the best of both worlds. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to touch that compared to just prompting it. You're not going to get
Yes.
that kind of stuff if you're just prompting. Same with music. And I think that's what's exciting about the future of AI. If we use it the right way, I think we're going to get stuff that is going to be beyond our
100%.
imagination. And I'm
100.
personally excited about that.
100%. 100%. Very exciting. What's next for all the three um, AI, or I should say, startups that you are advising? You on the board and you co-founded also. What's next,
Yep.
and also an advice that you would give the younger generation of AI kind of enthusiasts or artists that really kind of confused. Is it worth it to pursue my uh, beloved hobby and talent that I was given to sing, to play? Am I going to be outcasted by technology and kicked aside? Is it true? Or,
Yeah, those are great questions. Yeah. Yeah, so with Barrios AI and then Guitari and Cosmo Harmonics, they work together. So Barrios AI right now is already available. We just have one book, which is intermediate. So that's for music scientists like me, like data science and machine learning and music. But the next 3 books are going to be for beginners, meaning just beginner friendly, right? It's not going to be like code and a lot of Python and all of this stuff. And so
Uh-huh.
what we're doing there is just making those available. There's going to be free videos on YouTube, and I'm going to post those. So that's what's happening there. Guitari is gamified guitar learning with a focus on your vision, your unique voice, and what you want to create, and then allowing you to do self publishing on that same platform. And then Cosmo Harmonics is really me just demonstrating how I use AI to do really crazy stuff. But I didn't really get into Cosmo Harmonics too much, but I'm using JPL data of planetary motions to create chords and create new chord structures. Most chords are discrete numbers. Like if you hear an orchestra tuning, that's 440 megahertz, A equals 440. So every note that you hear is a fixed number. My compositions are moving like the planets, and they have these like very continuous data types. And that's something that's data science and music and composition combined. It's something that, it would be very difficult for someone to do if you weren't a data scientist and a musician. But I'm showing, like, it's like open learning. Like, here's how I use AI. Here's how I'm handling protecting the music. Here's the relationship. And getting to your final question, what would I say to the next generation of creative individuals and musicians and artists of all kind? No, I do not think that you're going to have a problem with creating your music and singing and playing an instrument and being a creative writer, whatever creative act that is. Because if you learn, and now here's the advice, if you learn what AI really is, and you can do that with Barrios AI, or you can do that in a lot of places on the internet, right? Try to understand how generative AI works, how to prompt them, and the combination of having that understanding and having a healthy relationship with AI means that your music and your creativity with that responsible and safe relationship means that you're going to outperform somebody who is just prompting, right? And I think that's pretty standard. That's how it's always been. If someone just picks up a guitar and starts strumming it, or they start using like Ableton with prefabricated loops, right? That's not going to be as exciting as someone who's been working really hard at their instrument or working really hard creating their own loops in Ableton, right? So I think that already exists, and that's not going to change. The only thing that's changing are the tools, and these are very powerful tools. So with power comes great responsibility. So my advice is take that responsibility seriously, right? Understand how these tools work and keep being creative and let the AI do everything else. But if you do mix them, do it in a way that's you maintain the creative control.
Amazing. Good advice. Well said and well put together, my friend. Well, I just want to thank you for taking the time and coming to Soundbreaker and give your knowledge and your expertise and your scientific approach to music, to creativity, to everything, because you're both. You're a creative artist and you're also an engineer, or I would say the data scientist, and combine so many things. I don't think I have a particular title for you, but and I don't like
Me
titles, but I
neither.
think you combine so many interesting things that really kind of could help forward our understanding of AI, generative, especially in the music and entertainment industry. You know,
Yeah. Thank you
yeah,
for having me. I really
my
enjoyed this
pleasure.
conversation, and I'm really
Likewise.
excited about the future. Thanks.
Well, the same, likewise, same here. And this concludes today's episode of Soundbreaker. Please make sure to follow us on socials and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.